Okay, let's see, some goodies came in. Oh, I love goodies. Well, here's the compressor for the onboard air. It's a Via Air, and it's a rather large one. It's, of course, made in China, but it seems to be relatively well made, and it seems to be relatively well endorsed by the sort of low-riding, bagged types. One nice thing about it is that it has a remote inlet air filter, which means I can route it up to somewhere a little more convenient, because I'm going to be placing this in the very back of this tool locker on the driver's side. It'll go right in about, if I can do this holding the hands, right in about there. And we'll put a cover across here to protect it. And of course, I'll reroute the air filter up maybe into here or somewhere that's a little easier to get at. So that's a really nice item. I wanted to put it somewhere where it's basically out of the valuable tool lockers. I really enjoy these tool lockers, and I need them, and I'm going to build some other ones as well. It's kind of interesting because I'm also putting a pump on the other side. The fuel pump itself goes down in this side, making that relatively out of the way as well. With the compressor, I also picked up this nice 3-gallon aluminum tank. It's not easy to find an aluminum tank. Well, maybe it is, but I was glad to come across this one. And I'm going to mount this right, basically, if I can do this, one hand, there. Now, it's tempting to get a large air tank when you have a large compressor, but you have to think about your recovery time. Really, running the airbags and the air locker that I have in this truck are a minor project or demand for the compressor. What I'm going to be doing mostly is running air tools and airing up tires and stuff like that. So I need a fairly large capacity, but not necessarily a large reserve, because it just takes so long to bring the pressure back up. Also got some other goodies from my marine supplier. This is the hull liner I'm going to be using as headliner in the cab. It's really quite nice. It's a lot thicker than I thought it would be, and it stretches in two dimensions, making it conform well to a three-dimensional object, thus the roof of the cab, and some thin insulation I'm going to use for that as well. This is sort of the last step of the sound insulation. This is the only sound insulation that's an absorber that I'm using in the truck anywhere. And well, a cloth material isn't necessarily what you first think of in a Land Rover, but I'm hoping for the roof, inside of the roof, I can keep that clean enough and tidy enough, because it'll make a huge impact on the amount of noise that makes up in there. Obviously, on the inside of the skin of the roof, I'm going to put first a deadener, which is a heavy bonded on rubber material I have, then the thin slate insulation, then the hull liner itself. Anyway, gets home with some other stuff. See ya. So listen, heater. I really had some very ambitious plans for heater for this truck, but you know, I'm running out of time, and truthfully, Series 3, or more important, late Series 2A heaters are not bad, especially if you have a good blower. This is a Series 3 heater. You'll recognize the way it sits on the bulkhead. There's the footwell in there, and the heat comes out basically into the parcel shelf, into the black plastic arrangement that makes up the horrible Series 3 dash. Well, it's a relatively good heater with a good blower, but the location of the heat duct coming into the truck is not very suitable for 2As. But the neat thing about it, you can get the Series 3 heater in, you disregard that this is all taken apart, the same format roughly, but it's a late 2A heater. So this, if I put the end cap on, you'd see how it went together. It goes together basically like that. No, it doesn't. It goes together like that. So it sits against the footwell the same way, except instead of the heat coming in through the top, the heat comes in down below the lip. In other words, below the parcel shelf, which is really important, because you don't really want your heat coming into the parcel shelf or the metal, tray. I don't know what you call it. Dash box, I guess is what it's called. So it comes in below the dash box, which is handy, and it goes into that late 2A, not quite so horrible plastic arrangement that's underneath there. I actually modified this slightly. I'll close this up and I'll make a duct coming out the side, basically coming out that triangular face right there. So anyway, if you have a late 2A heater, it's really not a bad solution for a 2 or 2A. Whereas the Series 3 heater is not so great. And it has the same core. One nice thing when you put these things back together, you have to put gasket material inside so that the heater core is basically protected from rattling around, and the air that passes around the heater doesn't leak past it, so all the heat actually gets heated. A really great material for this, and I'm using it, is the same sound insulation that I've been using on the truck, which is a heavy rubber on one side and then a foam on the other. So it works out really pretty well. So if I take these side gaskets, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm going to slide the heater core down in to the heater with gaskets both sides. Just squeeze that down in there. Don't forget the end gaskets as well. There's got to have gasket all the way around all four sides of the heater core, or you're going to leak hot air. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to send cold air past the core, and you're going to get heat air that is not as hot as it should be. Slide that down in there, and we're good. Now to slide the cover on, put it back together with some stainless steel screws, and we'll mount it. See ya. Well, I absolutely loathe to do this, but it's got to be done. Finally have to cut a hole in the bulkhead for the heater. As I mentioned, or I may have mentioned, I was planning on building a heater, or coming up with some really exotic heater system. But the truth is, I just got to get a heater in here. And as I mentioned, the late Series 2A, which is really an early version of the Series 3 heater, is really quite a good heater, especially for this application. The trick is, it takes a rather large hole. Wants a 5 by 9 hole cut in the top of the footwell here. And, you know, if I turn to some other heater at some point, maybe I can use that hole, or I can always cover that hole up. It's just putting a hole in that super nice, well-sealed bulkhead kind of bothers me. But I got to get on with it. What I do have, though, if I just remove the entry duct there, is a wicked blower. This is amongst the best blower you can buy. It's a marine blower, very, very expensive, 250 cubic feet per minute, and 100% duty cycle, and absolutely sealed. There's absolutely no vents or anything on this thing, so the motor itself should run a very, very long time. So that's going to make a fantastic blower for me. Unfortunately, it's quite a bit bigger, so the inlet hole will not line up with the stock Series 3 inlet hole on the side of the fender. Now my fender actually doesn't have a hole in it right now because this truck only had a shin burner before. So I have to decide whether or not I'll actually cut a new hole to match that blower or come up with some other system. Sort of tempted to duct it forward and out the side of the front of the fender, which early Kodiaks had, but I'm not quite sure yet. So that sort of affects where I put the heater itself, and just got to figure this stuff out, but I guess got to do it. So 10 minutes from now, it'll all be done. See ya. Well, listen, I don't know what you'll think of this, but I always agonize over how to run lines to the back of the truck. It's always this debate between longevity and repairability. Obviously, I'm trying to build a truck that will last effectively forever, but I'm also trying to build a truck that's easy to repair. So, in some senses, what I'm about to show you isn't necessarily all that easy to repair, but I think the compromise is worth it. What I'm doing now is the fuel lines. Basically, because it's fuel injected, I need two lines. 5/16 to the gas tank. One is the feed and one is the return, obviously. So I'm using copper. They're flying down here, crossing over here. The reason I had to notch them over to this side of the frame here is because I don't want them too close to the exhaust. And I don't want them on top of the frame at this point, because if there's any pressure down on that, I don't want it to wear through the copper. And along the top of the frame, all the way along to here, and then behind and out to here, and I'll explain why this is here for now. Now you say, okay, why are you putting your lines on top of the frame? That's where all the mud and junk collects. Well, that's true. There's no doubt about it. This will be just caked with mud when the truck is in use. But when you think about it, it's copper and stainless steel fittings. Nothing here is going to rust. And there's no question having stuff on the side of the frame is a problem on Land Rovers, especially when you get to the back. You don't want any lines at all in this area here, because this is where all the brush and junk and branches get caught up in your wheels and drag around in here and make a mess of everything. Even this is quite a compromise, but I'll explain why I'm doing that in a minute. So even though it's on top of the frame, and even though the screws are pointing straight up, I'd have to remove the seat box. Well, I'd have to remove the tub to get these lines off. I hope these lines will be here forever. So that's my justification for doing that, and I don't know, we'll see if that works out for me. So the reason I've got both the return and the feed line sticking out here, I may have mentioned I'm going to have the fuel tank in the back of the tool locker. Not the fuel tank, excuse me, the fuel pump. So it'll be right about here. So the return line, which is the inner one, is actually going to loop right around and go into the return fitting on the gas line, gas tank. The supply is going to come around here, up into the fuel pump through a fuel filter, back down and into this line. Well, why didn't I just make the return right here? I'll tell you why. I'm not cutting an access hole in the bottom of the tub. Now again, maintenance. Why, Peter, wouldn't you do that? Because if you have trouble with your gas tank, you're going to have to remove your tub to get at it. Not quite. I'm going to have to drop the tank, no doubt about it. The only way I can drop the tank without having access holes is to make sure that all the lines can come to the side where I can get at them, either there or here. So the vent line will come around and have a T or a union and come back. The fuel lines will all come to here, so I can disconnect everything here. and then climb underneath and drop the tank. Frankly, the way the truck will be set up, it won't be that hard to lift the tub out too, but that's my logic there. I really loathe to have any sort of fittings back here, because if there's one thing about driving in our climate, is that we get a lot of ice built up behind the wheels. In winter, this whole area underneath the back, inside the fender, will be a solid block of ice. Well, what happens is, as that solid block of ice melts, it then wants to fall off. And if all these hoses and wires are embedded in it, it just hangs on those hoses and wires. So, I'm going to have to do something about that. One, I'm going to have to make it really strong, and two, I may actually make a little mud shield in there to protect that. Anyway, we'll see. So, I'm generally pleased with it, even though there's obviously a compromise, but everything about building the ultimate truck is a compromise. Anyway, gotta keep moving. See ya.